Welcome to the Clear Admit MBA Admissions Podcast. I'm Graham Richmond, and this is your WireTaps for Monday, April 4th, 2022. I'm joined by Alex Brown from Cornwall, England. Alex, how are things going this week?
Very good. Thank you, Graham.
So, man, what a week or several weeks here. I mean, this past week we had, Harvard, Stanford, all that stuff, and it just comes on top of all the results that have been coming out over the last few weeks. But where do things stand? Are we done? What's coming up, if anything? What do we do?
Yeah, I mean, Harvard and Stanford were obviously the big programs last week releasing decisions. I mean, obviously, we're recording this from last week, so we're seeing currently a lot of Stanford activity on the site. This upcoming week, it is going to be Sloan and actually Johnson in terms of releasing decisions, but they basically wrap up the round two rounds of sort of decision releases. So hopefully over the last 3 or 4 weeks, including this upcoming week, several listeners have had some great offers because that's, the bulk of round two will now be completed. The application deadlines for round three are also now rolling out at a more rapid pace. So we're switching gears to round three. We do know that Harvard doesn't have a round three, so they're done, other than their 2+2 program, and the deadline for that will be later in April.
Right.
The round two's pretty much in the bag, Graham.
Yeah. So it's been exciting, a lot of fun. I did want to say, we don't ask for much on the show or even on our site. We provide tons of info and insight, and it's really all free for people. And so I did want to ask people to try to pay it forward, or, I know you and I debate, is it pay it back, pay it forward, by submitting interview reports if you had interviews at top schools, or even by just sharing a DecisionWire post where you summarize, here's where I applied, here's where I got in, these are the dollar amounts of my scholarships, here are my numbers, etc. Those posts are really useful to the community as they, help to decide where to go, where to apply, etc. So if you're thinking that you like Clear Admit and you like this podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could just take a moment, fill out a DecisionWire entry or submit an interview report, do whatever you can to give back to the community. I would also argue that even just hanging out on the site and leaving comments or helping others who are just now starting to apply is so useful. And actually, Alex, we've kind of introduced or reintroduced an incentive program for the folks leaving comments on our site, right? So I think people have noticed that if you get a number of likes on the comments that you leave on the site, you get a star. And I think it's 30 likes gets you 1 star, 60 likes gets you 2, and 90 gets you 3. Am I getting this right, Alex?
You're getting it right, Graham.
So what we're doing now is, if you get 1 star, we're going to send you a $10 Amazon gift card. If you get a 2nd star, we're going to send you a $20 Amazon gift card. And if you make it all the way to 3 stars, that's 90 likes, you can get a $50 Amazon gift card. So we're introducing that. We did it last year. It was a lot of fun. And it's just a way to encourage everyone to help each other out, leave comments, all that stuff. So that'll be fun. And you're keeping track of this, right?
I am trying to keep track of it. So absolutely brilliant. And you also go back to this idea of putting an entry on DecisionWire. I mean, I think DecisionWire is, I'm a bit biased, but I think it's our best tool in as much as it's a really good reflection of, where people choose to apply, where they then gained admissions, where they then decided to enroll. And the reason why I'm talking about this is it's a really good sort of assessment of the marketplace in terms of where candidates choose to go based on their choices, where they choose to apply, and so forth.
Yeah.
And I know we're going to talk about a ranking in momentarily, and this is a good segue into the validity of a ranking versus maybe more sort of marketplace-based insight in terms of where customers choose to go.
Yeah, so let's get into that. I mean, we'll just dive in. We, as you know, the U.S. News MBA rankings came out last week, and we did an article about it. I kind of weighed in and stuff, but I wondered what your take was. And I don't know if for those kind of tuning in who don't have the rankings handy, Wharton and Chicago were tied at the top. Then we had Kellogg and Stanford tied for 3rd, and Harvard and MIT tied in the 5th slot. And it goes on from there. You can look on our website or over at US News if you want to see the full ranking. But there was some interesting movement. What do you make of the ranking, Alex? I know that historically you've been a big fan of US News and their MBA ranking, often touting it as probably the best of the lot.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of US programs, obviously, so that's all we're focusing on in the US News rankings. And I do think they are the standard bearer for what we would call ordinal rankings.
Sure.
And they usually get it quite right in terms of an ordinal ranking. But this year, I'm a little bit bemused when you've got Stanford tied at number 3, Harvard tied at number 5, and we just know through our years of sort of experience and looking at DecisionWire data and various other things that really Harvard and Stanford sit at the top of the pile in their own tier. Wharton's just behind them, and then the rest of the M7 are behind Wharton. And then, so we've come up with this sort of tiered-based ranking system versus an ordinal ranking system. And we can go into detail on why tiers make more sense than an ordinal, but I don't know that that's what we want to cover in today's episode. But nevertheless, for the first time this year, I'm less impressed with US News's assessment right at the top, because neither Harvard or Stanford is at the top of the heap. Wharton, absolutely tied for number 1. Again, I mean, we're obviously a bit biased towards Wharton with our history with Wharton, but again, if you look at DecisionWire data, and if you've been around the industry for several years, you'll recognize that it's Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, Harvard, Stanford in either order, Wharton maybe just a tad behind in terms of customer choice.
Yeah.
And that's just not getting reflected. Now, there's also some other interesting movements and so forth that have been heavily quoted. I mean, Yale moving up to number 7. I mean, Yale, yeah, they're a reasonably new MBA program in the history of the MBA degree. So it makes sense that they've continued on a steady rise over several years. US News now puts them in at number 7. I still think they're in that next tier down, that sort of 8 to 10 or 11, and that's mixed in with Haas and Tuck and possibly Stern.
Yeah.
And then below that, you have another tier of schools that includes sort of Darden, Duke, and Johnson and UCLA and stuff. And again, US News almost gets that order correct, but
yeah,
there's a little bit of debate. But at the end of the day, if you look at their sort of top 2022, yes, they've got the right schools. No, they're not in exactly the right order, and a tiered ranking system is better.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously, like you said, they've got the right schools. They're all there across the top 16 or even top 20. That's the usual suspects. But yeah, some of the order is a little funny. I will say, just to be clear here, what we've done is over the years, we've just analyzed from DecisionWire data, where do people go when they get into a bunch of different schools? And does there seem to be an implied pecking order just based on the way the market behaves?
Right.
And so I love this because it's just a market-driven ranking. We call it a tiered ranking because, again, we don't think that there's any material difference between, say, Chicago, MIT, Columbia, and Kellogg, because it really depends on the candidate and where they want to go and what they want to do with their career. So there's a tier there, like you're saying. And I think the same thing's true with these other groupings that you've mentioned. It's kind of silly that people hash it out. Oh, is Yale really number 7 or should they be number 8? It just starts to get a little ridiculous. And, obviously we are seeing a number of ties this year in the groups, and that's kind of amusing to me too. But in any event, I mean, I will say there were some schools that made some bigger jumps. Emory kind of jumps up to number 21 from 26 this year. Ross ended up cracking the top 10, landing at number 10 after coming in at 13 last year. So there's been some interesting movements. And the only other one that was a big mover that I can think of is Notre Dame Mendoza jumped from like 36 to 25, which was impressive as well. So, but yeah, I agree. I think there's a flaw in the kind of ordinal ranking. I also should mention that I went through the data, and I'm no statistician, and I'm sure people will have looked at it even in more depth than I have, but it did seem to me like the factor that's limiting the likes of Harvard and Stanford from coming out ahead of Booth and Wharton, for example, seems to be that a lesser percentage of their graduating class are getting jobs, but by graduation time or within 3 months. And some of that, I think a big chunk of it, is because there are a lot of Harvard and Stanford grads going out and starting their own companies, and so they're not reflected in these numbers. Maybe they're not even earning much money either, right? So I don't know if it makes sense to essentially penalize schools that foster entrepreneurial endeavors. So in any event, that seems to be what's happening. I could be misreading the way that the methodology works, but it feels like Wharton and Chicago are getting really high marks because they have great stats both inbound with respect to admission statistics and outbound with respect to placing a large percentage of their graduates. So in any event, I'll leave it there. But yeah, it's always fun to debate these rankings when they come out.
Yeah, no doubt. I have a few comments, though, on what you just said. So
Yeah.
this might be a longer episode than usual.
Yeah.
In terms of this desirability to get jobs, this is a really interesting point that you bring up, and it seems to have penalized Harvard and Stanford in these rankings. So there are two things, or you could look at it in a couple of different ways. One is, yes, US News needs to tweak its algorithm or whatever you call it so it can come up with a better assessment. And maybe sort of reducing the weight of this employed, directly after the MBA versus wanting to do their own thing, entrepreneurship. But also, I was reading on the Reddit discussion thread. There's a fantastic conversation over there on Reddit, really sort of debating this ranking. And another Redditor suggested actually there are folks at Stanford and Harvard possibly that aren't looking. Well, it's not that they're not looking for jobs, but because of their personal wealth and their family situation, they don't have the urgency necessarily to chase after that first job directly out of the MBA and can afford to take the time to look for something that's more optimal and so forth. So there's their suggestion is a little bit of that at play. And I just thought that was a really interesting argument that I hadn't necessarily heard of before. Now, in terms of these sort of jumping up and down in the rankings, Emory jumping up to, what is it, number 21? Well, frankly, Graham, they're in that tier.
Yeah.
They should be in that 17 to 21 tier. So congratulations, US News, for getting it right and putting them in the right place. Mendoza, again, I think they're now in that correct tier. They're in the sort of tier below Emory, but what are they? They're tied at 25. So that makes sense to me too. And congratulations to Ross.
Yeah.
I mean, they're in that tier that can include number 10 or maybe number 11, but just behind potentially Haas, Yale and Tuck. And so forth. So none of that surprises me. Now, I just a couple of things I was thinking about this morning, my time this morning. Mm-hmm. What does this really mean, let's say, for a school like Chicago that's tied for number 1, or a school like Ross that jumps to number 10? I teach a lot of marketing, and we in marketing we use this sort of funnel framework, right? So when you're trying to sort of sell someone a product, you've got to build awareness, you've got to gain interest, and then you've got to convert. I do think when someone does really well in a ranking, like Booth in this case, that might spike that awareness, which may be very good. Maybe they'll get some additional applications because of this jump. Mm-hmm. But will it affect conversions once candidates have gone through the process of the admissions process and really start to get a much deeper understanding of the different programs that make best sense for them? Does a leap in a ranking affect conversions? I don't know so much it would. I do think once you've been through that sort of customer journey, as we would call it, and you're weighing your offer of Harvard, let's say it's tied at number 5 versus Booth at number 1. I'm not sure how much weight you'll give that US News ranking at that point.
Yeah.
I know we spent a long time on this, but I think this is super interesting stuff.
And that's a really interesting point in the sense that I don't think it's going to impact Booth's ability to win head-to-heads with Harvard or maybe even Stanford. But I think what could happen is if it consistently ranks number one and you continue to see Kellogg at 3 and MIT at 5 and Columbia at whatever they are, 8 or 9, maybe Booth starts to win more of those head-to-heads within the kind of tier that they're, we would argue they're kind of similar schools. But yeah, so it's just interesting. We'll see how it all evolves. Again, love to discuss this stuff. And I've also been following some of the discussion on our site and over on Reddit. So yeah, very, very fun. This is kind of that time of year. And I agree. U.S. News, it's kind of a little strange this year, but they do tend to be, as you say, the standard bearer. They're the ranking that people look at for U.S. programs. So moving right along, I did want to mention that we finally have like a merchandise shop. You've seen all the designs. I know Lauren on our team helped develop those with Mike, and they're up in, we've got them up online. And so we now have like t-shirts and mugs and all this kind of fun stuff related to WireTaps, related to LiveWire. And so, yeah, just I encourage people to check that stuff out. I've had a lot of fun looking at the new designs that the team has come up with. But Alex, do you have a favorite design in the t-shirt category?
Of course. Keep calm and listen to WireTaps.
I figured you would say, yeah. So everyone can check those out. That we've had a lot of fun there. We put up an article on the website that features, links to where you can grab the shirts and stuff. Other than that, over on the site, we continue to release Real Humans pieces. I'll be really brief this week because I know we want to get to our candidates. But we did feature, there's kind of 3 alums that we profiled. One is this guy named Chris Shoemaker, who graduated from Carnegie Mellon Tepper in 2016 and is now a VP at Bank of America in investment banking. He was an electrical engineer and then a digital marketer. So he's kind of done it all over the course of his career. And, he just gave some really nice advice in his piece where he talked about using the MBA as a time to explore. And I don't think he meant career options. I think he really meant there's literally a line from him where he says, go travel, go to events, sign up for things on campus that you're not sure about, but just try them out. And he mentioned business school is really your last chance to do some of this stuff for a long time. So yeah, just really, going sort of headlong into the MBA experience was his recommendation. So I had a lot of fun reading that.
But is he saying that he didn't enjoy his time in Pittsburgh and he's got to get out of the place?
No, I think he's saying...
I'm kidding.
But I think he, he's clearly done really well. It's pretty impressive, the kind of career trajectory he's been on.
Yeah.
Then we also heard from Lillian Izura. She is a Duke Fuqua grad from just class 21, and she's now a consultant at BCG. She's originally from Nigeria, but had been working in Texas and oil and gas for Halliburton and has kind of shifted into consulting. And, her advice was similar. I guess more on the academic side, but she said, take as many experiential learning opportunities as possible. And she said that she only kind of started to do that later in her MBA and wished she had kind of, dove into that stuff earlier on. So that was kind of cool just to hear her trajectory. I just love to see all these career switchers too. It's just, fascinating.
Yeah.
And then the last one we have is someone who's making dreams come true as a marketing strategy manager for Disneyland Resorts. And so this is a woman named Casey Brown. She went to USC Marshall, graduated in 19. And yeah, she was working in like manufacturing before. And so again, using the MBA to do a career pivot. And, she mentioned that the big thing for her is that you don't, from her perspective, you don't have to land your dream job right when you graduate from business school, that it's okay to like do an internship and decide that it's not for you and do, kind of take a different path. And she kind of I think she's in her kind of dream role now and maybe wasn't there initially or something. So she just was kind of saying like, look, I went and I interned at what I thought was going to be my dream company when I was at USC. And during that internship, she realized, you know what, this is not what I want to do. And so she pivoted and found another path and is really happy as a result. So yeah, just fun to hear from these actual MBA grads and the journeys that they've taken.
Back to the second alum.
Yeah.
Do you know how Duke explains or teaches its candidates to how they say the name of their business school?
I can't remember. I know that you've told me, but it's something to do with the word few, right?
Few, qualify.
Yeah.
Few
Yeah, few qualify. There you go.
What about Amory? How does Amory do it?
I don't even know. We got to get Melissa Rapp on the podcast. She's the admissions director there, and have her give us a lesson on how to properly say Guizetta. I think that's how you say it, but Guizetta, I'm not exactly sure, but that's a tough one. I always have trouble spelling it too. So,
Yeah.
in any event, let's get into our candidates. The only other thing I wanted to mention is that I had Lisa Rios, who's the admissions director at NYU Stern, come and do an admissions director Q&A podcast episode, and that aired last week. Encourage people to check that out. She's such a wonderful person. I had a great time chatting with her, and so if you're interested in NYU Stern, you would be foolish not to listen to this episode. So give it a whirl. Other than that, we don't have any fan mail, Alex. Or
I got to ask though, I'm not letting you off that lightly. Did your in your podcast with Stern, did they explain how they like to frustrate candidates in terms of when they release their decisions?
She did explain that it's all rolling within each round. And so there's no set, kind of like, oh, we're going to issue everyone invites on this date. It really is a kind of, rolling by the individual candidacy process. And that's why some people, take longer to go through. They need extra reads, whatever it might be. So, yeah, but I know we've seen that on LiveWire where some candidates kind of, are scratching their head about when am I going to hear? And it's a school that takes a little bit longer than some of their peers, or at least is less regimented in terms of like when stuff's going to happen, which can create some frustration. Yeah.
Very good.
Other than that, there was no fan mail, no reviews. I'm kind of wondering, although we are racking up the ratings on Spotify. I think we have a 5-star rating with, 40 or 50 ratings at this point. So that's great. Other than that, should we get into our candidates? I know you spent some time going through and finding really interesting folks for us to profile this week.
Yeah, we better hurry up. Kick on. Let's kick on.
All right. So this is WireTaps candidate number 1. So this is an ApplyWire entry that we received, and this candidate is looking to start in 23. So they're kind of an early bird. It's a candidate who's been in the Marines. I guess they've got a GPA of 3.42, which they earned at Columbia University as an undergrad. I think they studied history there. They've been in the Marines. They're currently located in California. They would love to land in New York, and they want to work in investment banking. So they want to go military to investment banking, and they've got companies like Bank of America, Barclays, Capital One, all the, Goldman, JP Morgan, all the usual suspects. And, they posted, I guess they still need to get the test done. They took some diagnostic tests with the GRE, and I think they had a score of 321, but they haven't yet taken it for real. So they posted to the site. I did want to mention the schools that they're currently considering are Columbia for early decision, Cornell, Georgetown, NYU Stern, and Wharton. And again, they want to get into banking, and they're coming from the Marines. So, Alex, what do you make of this candidate? Any other kind of bits of info that you want to share as we assess here?
Yeah, this is a really interesting candidate because, the liberal arts degree or, history degree from Columbia, presumably a good degree, but a history degree, into the Marines. And now, as they're going for their MBA, they want to pursue investment banking. Now, typically, a military candidate is going to come out and maybe after the MBA do consulting. I would say consulting is probably the majority choice.
Or operations, yeah.
Consulting or operations, and then moving into a sort of an operations role in the longer term. That's what we see a lot from our military candidates. So this candidate stood out to me, Graham, in terms of they want to go in investment banking. They have a liberal arts degree. They got a very, I would assume, a very strong military experience. Is investment banking accessible to this candidate?
Yeah, that's the big question. I think it is, although if I were the admissions officer, I would be looking at the transcript for any evidence of kind of quantitative experience with, coursework. And I know they mentioned that before they ended up majoring in history, I think didn't they say they were doing something else? I can't remember.
Pre-med.
Yeah. And so I do wonder if that, means that they had some, kind of good quantitative coursework.
Right.
Of course, I'd want to know what the grades were. They mentioned that's why my GPA is on the lower end, which made me a little nervous. If all the quant pre-med courses were bad, lower grades, that could be concerning. Although they have a 3.4 overall, so I doubt they have any really bad grades. Given, so yeah, but that is you would look for evidence, and they do mention they do a lot of with like personal finance, but investing in the market on your own, that does not make someone, the admissions reader, think that you're necessarily a quant genius or anything.
Right. I mean, they're going to take MBA Math, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is very important for them. In terms of their test score, they're really going to have to show on the quant side of their test score some strength. And like you say, I don't think they're taking the test yet. And they're beefing up that quant side, but that quant test score is going to need to be strong. MBA Math is going to be used to show evidence. They obviously have a passion for finance, and this is why they want to take this step. But just and I think that they're obviously smart enough to recognise that they've got to show this evidence in order to set themselves up. But if they do show this evidence, Graham, what you're saying is, yes, investment banking absolutely is accessible. And presumably in that sort of recruiting process to investment banking, there's a lot of training that goes on anyway to get their sort of new recruits sort of up to speed.
Yeah, and I would argue that, they can, in some cases, it depends on the program, but they can, when they get to business school, they can make sure that first semester is rich in finance-related coursework so that by the time January, February comes around and they're recruiting for banking jobs, they can point to some grades and track record in quant coursework. I will say, yeah, on their diagnostic for the GRE, their quant is coming in at around a 70th percentile. So I would, if I were them, I would look to boost that as a way to just demonstrate. I don't know if you wanted to mention it, but I wanted to talk about also just the fact that they're targeting Colombia. I believe they're also kind of first-gen Asian American, right? And so I guess I wondered what you thought of this is an Asian male first-gen to go to college, I guess, right? And so they went to Columbia. So there's a lot to like here, but I also wonder to what extent are they overrepresented or not? I don't know. It's sort of it's a little bit of a wild card because they have, a lot of interesting facets to their background.
Yeah, I mean, are they overrepresented? I'd probably, when you add everything up, they're probably not overrepresented. But the fact is, they're targeting Colombia. They're targeting early decision. That's very good. If they're targeting Colombia and don't apply early decision, that would be a problem, I think, for them in terms of Colombia admissions. Certainly also targeting Wharton makes a lot of sense in terms of wanting to move into investment banking, as does Cornell Johnson, quite frankly. They're out of, all the top programs, Johnson's finance recruits, the majority are directly into investment banking. We know that. So I like their target schools. I know another concern that you had is that sort of double dipping, going from Columbia history to Columbia for your MBA. But if you want to be in New York City in investment banking and they want to stay in investment banking in the long run,
right,
I got to imagine maybe having an MBA from the best school that you can get into, even if it is a double dip, is probably the right strategy for this candidate.
Yeah, I mean, my point to them was, I guess I'm thinking if they could go to Wharton, which is also on their list, that would give them the benefit of getting into an additional network. So they'd have the Penn network and the Columbia network on their resume and in their Rolodex. So yeah, that was the only thing I was wondering. And I think obviously some of this will depend on how the testing goes and how they're able to put together their applications, because Wharton's never going to be a walk in the park for anybody to get into. So, but I would say if they got into all these schools, I would say don't double dip. As a rule, why not expand your network and so on. But you're right. If they're going to be in New York and, obviously Columbia or Stern would be terrific options too. So they have the right schools on the list. I did wonder about maybe a booth or something, but I recognize they can't apply everywhere. And I think they're looking for schools to add. They have Georgetown on their list. So they're looking probably for schools to add that, round out a kind of grouping of programs, right, from different tiers. So in any event, interesting candidacy. And I want to wish them the best of luck. Thank them for their service. I feel like, this guy's got a good head on his shoulders and he's, thinking through all the right next steps. And yeah, I was just pleased that he shared the profile and that we could weigh in.
Yeah, and the critical success factor, or the thing that's really going to sway, is where that quant score comes in on the test score. So best of luck in prepping, and for that, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was going to say, I wonder if they should take the GMAT, which is known to be quantitatively more, maybe a little more rigorous,
Yeah.
and if they want to go into banking, and they're only applying to business schools. But in any event, that's a whole other kettle of fish. But I feel like they, whatever the case, they got to do well on the test.
Yeah.
So let's move on, though, and talk about WireTaps candidate number 2. So this is another ApplyWire entry. It's for a candidate, again, who's kind of an early bird looking to start in the fall of 23. This person has 5 schools on the target list, and those schools are Berkeley, Duke, Harvard, Michigan, and Kellogg. They have been working in healthcare strategy and consulting. And post-MBA, they list tech, but they mention in their notes kind of healthcare tech as a possibility. The companies they listed, though, were big kind of tech companies, so Apple, Amazon, Google, the usual suspects there. So they're still trying to figure out their career path, whether it's pure tech or maybe healthcare-related tech. They've got a GPA of 3.2 and 3.5 years of work experience. They have yet to take the standardized test, but they are expecting to get a 750 on the GMAT. That's what they're at least promising us. They went to a top 15 university for undergrad, and they had a liberal arts kind of undergrad with a business minor. They mentioned that they have an upward trend in the GPA. So the 3.2, is a little bit a result of kind of poor performance at the beginning. Other than that, they, have a lot of different promotions that they can tout. They've been very focused on healthcare throughout their career, and they do some extracurriculars. Things seem to be in line there on that front, and they're still kind of thinking through what it is that they want to do post-MBA, because they're hesitating between product management with maybe just tech or healthcare, related stuff, but moving out of the kind of, healthcare payers and providers and more into the kind of services and products side of it. So I'll leave it there, Alex. What do you make of this candidate?
Well, if she gets the 750 on the GMAT, I'd be like, that's absolutely fantastic. I mean, I can't imagine how smart someone must be to expect a 750 on the GMAT, having, obviously several hundred years ago taken the test myself. But if we could take her at her word, and I'm assuming this female candidate just by their username, then that's absolutely fantastic. Their GPA is a little lower than average, so obviously an outstanding GMAT's going to sort of offset that a little bit. What I really like about this candidate is their work experience sounds like it's probably super strong. They've also done some good stuff in their extracurriculars. And I know your advice is going to be double down on healthcare with the goals and stick to it, whether it's healthcare tech or healthcare more generally. And I think if they do that, then yeah, this is an M7 candidate all the way, assuming that's 750 on the GMAT. So Wharton's missing from their list of target schools, and maybe even Stanford. But other than that, yeah, I think a very strong candidate, Graham.
Yeah, I was puzzled a little bit as to, I think if they do double down and go healthcare all the way, then, applying to the Wharton Healthcare Management Program, which again is just a major in the MBA program there that you have to pre-declare. It's the only one that I can think of at any school where you tell them what you want to major in before, but it sort of puts you on a different track to getting into the program because you have a slightly different process. But it's often a really great way to sort of differentiate yourself as you apply there. It was unclear to me as to why, if healthcare is the focus, I see Kellogg, I see Duke, Harvard, we know, places a number of people in healthcare. So I was puzzled not to see Wharton. It could be, maybe this person doesn't want to be in Philly or so. I have no idea what it could be. Or maybe when they say they went to a top 15 university, maybe they went to Penn undergrad or something and they don't want to go back. Or
Penn's not top 15.
Oh, isn't it?
No, it's Ivy.
I know it's Ivy, but I think it might now be, I haven't looked at the U.S. News undergrad rankings, but they've been really doing quite well even within the Ivies these days. But
Yeah, but they wouldn't call themselves a top 15 if they're an Ivy.
oh, you're
That's my point. That was actually part of that Reddit thread, which I absolutely loved. Yeah.
So the question
Yeah.
is what is a top 15 university? Does that mean it's sort of like a top 15 public university or
It means it's ranked 14 or 15.
Right, obviously. Yeah, but in any event, yeah, I wondered, like, is this, I mean, would you say, I wonder if this person went to like a Wesleyan or or a Middlebury or something, but those are, I think someone would say a top 15 liberal arts college. So in any event, I mean, she went to a good school.
Yeah.
I would just, it feels to me like, she could get a lot of mileage out of playing the healthcare angle, as you mentioned. And I agree. If the GMAT comes in where she says it's going to, everything else lines up really well. Since this is an early bird candidate, and I don't know if she mentioned it, and assuming again from the user handle that this is a woman, I would hope that she's tapped into the Forte Foundation and all the kind of services that they offer for female candidates going through the process, because that can be really helpful too with mentors and things. So in any event, yeah, I think that's a great candidacy, and appreciate you picking it out. And anything else on this one?
No, I wish them the best of luck, and if they score that 750 on the GMAT, that's absolutely fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on and talk about WireTaps candidate number 3. So this is a DecisionWire entry, and it's from a candidate who is undecided about where to go. They applied to Duke, Harvard, Kellogg, Darden, and Yale, and they were admitted to Duke, where they have a $50,000 scholarship, Kellogg, where they have a $20,000 scholarship, Darden with $40K, and Yale with no money. They were actually admitted to Yale off of the wait list in round 2 after having been waitlisted in round 1. They're going to be starting school this fall. They would love to work in tech, and they mentioned companies like Amazon, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Tesla. The GMAT score is a 720, the GPA a 3.76, and this candidate's located in Portland. And they mentioned that, they applied in round 1 to all these schools, and they were thrilled to get into the ones that they got into, which were UVA, Kellogg, and Duke. And then they basically decided, I'm going to go to Kellogg. And then they just heard, with the acceptance from Yale, and they're feeling torn. And they said, on paper, it seems like Kellogg is the right choice because of its higher rank and the scholarship that they have from the school, as well as job opportunities for their spouse. But is there anything I'm missing, they say? The Yale brand is so strong. So what do you make of this? Because it's an interesting dilemma. I mean, given that they'd already kind of decided where to go.
Yeah, I don't think they're missing anything, Graham. They got Kellogg, and I think even a little bit of money at Kellogg, but, I think Kellogg suits them very, very well. And, I didn't look at the comparable position in the US News rankings, Kellogg to Yale, but I'm sure Kellogg was above Yale, even though Yale jumped into that number 7 spot. Not that, again, we necessarily fans of that method of selecting schools, but, I mean, historically, Kellogg's renowned. They're terrific in many different disciplines. They've got a huge alumni network. Yale, yes, the university brand is outstanding, but in the business school circles, that Kellogg brand, especially in the US, would be my choice.
Yeah, this is interesting. So as I was reading the profile, it seemed familiar to me, and the user handle was familiar, and I did some digging, and we had profiled this candidate on an early episode of, WireTaps many moons ago, and I remembered that this candidate said they might want to go and work in the Southeast when they were done, and that they might want to work in kind of communications or kind of a marketing type role. And so, thinking about that, again, I come back to Kellogg, makes sense. Kellogg has really good sort of geographic placements in terms of covering the map.
Yeah.
Obviously, Duke places more people in the Southeast than any of the programs on this list. But if we're going based on the fact they've got some money from Kellogg, and Kellogg is, arguably in a tier above, then you start to get into, right back to where they've started, which is Kellogg. And they're not debating Duke, it seems. They're really, debating Kellogg or now Yale. Yale not giving them any money as well, I think makes it a hard sell. And so, yeah, I'm not really seeing it, especially if you think about, they mentioned their job opportunities for their spouse if they go to Chicago. So I don't know. I feel like they probably need to stand their ground and go with their original plan here.
Yeah, I mean, it would make more sense to me if this query was the other way around, right? If they'd got admitted to Yale, they matriculated at Yale, and then came off the waitlist at Kellogg, then yeah, maybe there's a bit of a conversation there. But I'm not getting it this way around, quite frankly, Graham. That you've already matriculated, you're already bought into a cult, a decision. I think this shouldn't sway them from a decision they've already made.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they mentioned in one of the comments that one thing that they like about Yale is the geographic element in terms of being close to New York City and other East Coast metros. But so I don't know, maybe they've shifted over remember they posted to ApplyWire many moons ago. And so maybe they've shifted their goal in terms of this Atlanta thing or something. And so maybe they're thinking they might want to land in New York or would that change your mind? Like if we knew they wanted to work in New York?
No.
You'd still say Kellogg. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
I mean, especially because they've already matriculated there. So they've already sort of gone down that pathway a little bit. It would be very difficult for me to think that an admissions offer from a program that is considered a tier below, with less of a financial aid package, makes sense. Yeah. For me, it's Kellogg.
Yeah. Makes sense. Okay. Well, I want to thank you, as always, for picking out these candidates for us to discuss this week. Again, lots of cool things going on between the rankings and all these new, Clear Admit t-shirts and and great content over on the website. So yeah, a lot of fun to do this episode this week. And we'll be back next week with another episode of WireTaps. Alex, yeah, thanks again for doing this.
Brilliant. Take care, everyone. Stay safe.